Hello and welcome. I am Matt Roddy, and this is the Greater Prescott podcast, where we talk about, you guessed it, all things Greater Prescott. Today, I am super excited to be on location, on set with Joe from Campground Coffee. Joe, thank you very much for joining me today.
Yeah, Matt, thank you for having me here. It's really fantastic. We're outside. It feels good. It's just beautiful.
Mm-hmm. In today's episode, you get to learn some of Joe's background. You get to learn about Jolene, which he'll talk about more, and he'll share about his business, and he'll talk a little bit about what brought him to the Prescott area. So that's what you guys are going to get to hear today.
Cool.
Let's dive right in. Please tell the listeners a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised, and fast forward to how the heck you ended up in Prescott.
Well, I was born and raised in Canada on a small farm in a really small town of about 3,000 people. And it was truly the middle of nowhere, but it was amazing to grow up there as a kid. We had rivers, we had fields and forests and hills, and I mean, it was just fantastic. Mm-hmm. And I lived there until I was 18 years old, at which point I left, didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I kind of took a gap year that turned into 6, which took me from kind of all over. I went and did a little Europe trip, and then headed down to the States here when I was 19. I lived in Northern California for a little while, and then Colorado. I was in Colorado for 3 years.
Okay.
And that was fantastic. Really loved it. Met a girl there and ended up marrying her.
Okay.
And that kept me in the States. Kind of more of a long-term thing. It was going to be one of these little like, hey, it'd be fun to live in the U.S. and then go back to Canada, and then you meet a girl and you're here for a little longer. So we loved Colorado, but things called us to the Phoenix area.
Okay.
So we were in the valley. As of 2004, I guess, soon after we got married. We were there for a long time. It was really nice. We lived in a couple places, but mostly in Tempe, and loved it. Had 2 boys down there. Now they're 10 and 8.
Wow.
Yeah. Once the youngest turned 4, things shuffled through. I was a teacher for a while.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What were you teaching?
I was teaching social studies. I actually taught American history as a Canadian citizen living in the U.S., and I taught American history. It was really kind of funny. And parents that found out thought that most of them thought it was comical. Some of them questioned my,
Yeah.
No, but it was all good.
It wouldn't surprise me if Canadians know more about the U.S. than people from the U.S.
Well, that's a misconception, I think, sometimes. There are quite a few that do, because we just learn a lot about it as kids and stuff like that, but yeah. I skipped a part there. I went to ASU.
Okay.
And that's where I did all of my undergrad for teaching.
Okay.
And while I was there, this is pretty key, I worked at Starbucks. For 4 years, and that's what got me into the whole
mothership
thing. The mothership, Mecca. I went up to Seattle, did all that stuff. It was what really got me into coffee. My initial kind of like, hey, here's more than Folgers kind of thing. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I moved on from Starbucks, taught for a while. My wife's job eventually actually went to being online, at which point I became a stay-at-home dad. We sold everything we had, and we traveled for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
So that was post-teaching. We're talking 2015 or 16 now. So we traveled all over the country. We hit 42 states and 6 or 7
very
provinces.
jealous.
It was amazing. It was truly amazing, and we were grateful about it. We couldn't believe that we were able to do this, and it was just awesome.
Because your wife, whose name is Lana,
Yep,
she was working basically remote?
She was working remote. Things shifted to that. Our boys actually our oldest requested, in kindergarten of all things, requested to be homeschooled. And we couldn't believe it. We were like, he was a social kid. We thought, man, he would just jump in. He'd been to preschool for 2 years. and he just didn't really dig the school thing. So that kind of triggered a little something like, oh, you want to be homeschooled? Well, then that opens up a few things.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Remote working, homeschooling.
Totally. It was like perfect for all that. So we spent a year or two traveling around the States.
What was your setup like?
It was really simple. We literally traveled in our Outback. And we had a big old Thule carrier on the top with all our camping gear. And then we would Airbnb, sometimes hotels. We kind of did it where if my wife had a conference in New York, we'd end up in New York. And then if the next one was in Austin in a month and a half, we just worked our way down to Austin. So it was one of those really cool opportunities that we took and just went for it. We ended up traveling overseas after that. For about 7 months, we were in Southeast Asia. So we hit a few different countries there, starting off in Bali. And Bali, I would say, was one of those countries that kind of triggered this like coffee culture. And it's somewhat surprising. I didn't realize this, but Bali is to Australia what Mexico is to us as Americans. As in, Australians have completely like tourists and everything all over Bali. Like they're everywhere there. And so they've turned this beautiful culture into and amped up the food culture and the coffee culture. And I didn't realize this, but Australians are like way into their coffee, and they love their lattes, and they love their all that stuff. And so Bali has this really cool coffee shop culture. We saw trailers, we saw old VW buses turned into coffee shops. We saw like jungle, like schools in the middle of the jungle for expats that would have a coffee shop and a meeting space for parents that were commuting their kids into these schools. And like it was woven throughout the entire country was this coffee thing. And that's probably kind of what triggered it. And then every country that we went to had a different way of doing their coffees, which was really cool. And our last country there was Vietnam. And they have a whole different system for it. And they pack it with sugar, which isn't my gig. But even just the way they brew it and the way they do things, like the coffee culture over there is just so diverse. And it kind of was one of those like, this is kind of cool. Still not, let's open up a coffee trailer, but setting some stepping stones in there, and which was really cool. We were in Thailand. And our boys came to us at breakfast one day, and we were chatting away, and all of a sudden our oldest said, well, we've been talking, and this has been a lot of fun to travel, but we're really ready for a school and to have some friends again. And we thought, you know what, that's fair. All along we had said, these 4 years we had said, if any of us run into something where emotionally or mentally we just can't take it anymore, we're going to talk about it as a family. Any four of us. Doesn't matter if it's our youngest, my wife, didn't matter. So when they said that, we said, you know what, that's totally fair, and let's look into what that looks like. So Phoenix was kind of obvious. That's where all my wife's family ended up. We had lived there at that point, we had lived there for 12 years. But we weren't totally convinced that we wanted to move back to the Valley. So we actually started looking out of state, California, even up into Utah. We love southern Utah. Yeah, right? Beautiful, all that stuff. And then Prescott just kind of popped up on my wife's radar. I hadn't even thought of it. And she actually came back with the boys in January, and I took the chance to stay a little longer. I did a little solo traveling. Once I got back, about like literally hours after I landed, and I was jet lagged and everything else, she's kind of hitting me with all this stuff, and finally she's like, and we're going to Prescott. I booked us a hotel in 2 days, and we're going to take a look at apartments and blah blah blah. And I'm like, oh, okay,
I'm jet lagged, honey.
Yeah, let's do it. So she was ready, man, and we just came up here. We stayed at this Hotel St. Michael right down the street, spent a night there, and just looked around at all these apartments. Found an amazing school for our boys right down the street from this apartment we ended up renting. Everything was just boom, boom, boom. Fell into place. And Prescott it was, like kind of out of nowhere. So now we're here, and that's kind of how we got to Prescott.
Yeah, Prescott was never on my radar.
Sure.
I was down in the valley as well. My wife's family has cabins here. They've been coming for decades.
Sure.
And so when we became married, we would come up to the family cabins, and I was smitten the first time. And there was just something about it. And that was, we're about to have our 10-year anniversary. So that was, say, 10 years ago.
Sure.
And it took us 8 years before the doors actually opened to get here. But you're right. There's just something about it.
It's incredible. Like you step out, like we stepped out of the Hotel St. Michael after checking in, and you're just like on that corner, and there's the courthouse, there's Whiskey Row with all the cool boutiques, and this is before you even know like there's this vibrant business community and young families moving in and all this kind of stuff. Like it just, like, even just from looking at it the first time, we were all, oh, this is really cool. We'd gone up to Flag. Flag was kind of our thing. And so that was why we'd missed Prescott for 12 years.
Makes sense.
It's the 17, right? You're cruising up the interstate.
You just keep going.
You see the sign that says Prescott, and you're like, oh, yeah, I've heard of this. And it pops up in the news every once in a while, but it was never on our radar. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, now we live here. So it's been a really cool thing.
Yeah, people always ask about the difference between Prescott and Flagstaff. And while it's hard to put into words, it's a very different culture.
Very different.
And I love Flagstaff. And it's an amazing place. It's not my jam necessarily, but I love it. It's beautiful. The people are very friendly, very laid back. It's a mountain town in Arizona. In Arizona. So it's, but nothing like Prescott.
No, it's totally
and that's
different.
fine.
I think it's great. I think it's cool that we have two, and we've often said Prescott's so central. Like, you can zip up, you can be snowboarding or skiing in Flagstaff and bar hopping around to all the breweries, and then swing by Prescott, pick up some swim stuff, and head down to the valley and jump in a pool and go to a, like, it's just so crazy how central we are.
Yeah, the South Rim is 2 hours and 5 minutes from here.
Yeah. It's like right there.
The Grand Canyon of all places.
Like one of the most magical places in the entire world. It's unbelievable. Unbelievable. And the beach, I mean, if you're a beach person, you've got it 6 hours. Like, it's not that bad.
No,
it's like right there.
It's a great place.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing all that. What a background that I could spend hours.
Right.
It means I'll just have to go get more coffee and
we'll just have to sit
Jolene. So then let's talk about what you do currently. As you guys see behind us, this is Joe's coffee trailer, but it's not just any coffee trailer. So give people some of the background on how this came to be and a little bit of her story.
Sure. So we once we moved to Prescott, then came our boys going into a school, and all of a sudden I was unemployed. Because you've got, my life as a stay-at-home dad had been for 6 years at that point.
Wow.
Even before we started traveling, I spent a year as a stay-at-home dad with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and now they were at that point 9 and 7 and in school, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, I'm out of a job. So all along, once when I became a stay-at-home dad, I really got into food. I got into cooking for our family, all that kind of stuff. And of course, as guys often do it, like, it can't just be, oh, I'm just going to provide for my family. It's like, what sort of an empire could I build with my new skills? So I got into the food truck scene and just the restaurant eating. I started subscribing to magazines and stuff on food. Like, it just became a
part
thing.
of your personality.
Right. That came in too. Yep. So we always kind of thought, well, wouldn't it be cool to do a food truck? And when we got here, it was one of those like, okay, so do I start working in a restaurant just to kind of get my hands dirty or clean because I would be a dishwasher essentially, or do we just kind of go for it? So after a bit of research, we were like, yeah, let's just figure out if we can go for it. We had a little bit of seed money from our sale of our house in the valley, all this stuff. It was great. It would have been a really great start. We went to our first food truck rally up here, and I hated it. I hated it for 2 reasons. One, everything seemed very loud to me. The generators were all going, and there was all these people, and I was like, man, that's not really the total vibe I'm going for. But the biggest thing is that all their windows were tiny, and there's a health code that says your window can only be so big if you're serving food out of a food truck. And in my mind, and you've been to my trailer, Matt, where I love to talk to people, and that's half the reason that let's be honest, it's probably more fully the reason that I opened this thing up, I wanted to join the community. I wanted to be a part of this community. And speaking out of an 18-inch window was not going to work for me. Yeah. So I literally went home. My wife and I was like borderline depressed. I was like, this is what I wanted to do. So we started looking up the codes, the health things and all this stuff. Well, it turns out if you're a coffee cart, you can get away with it a little bit more. And I did a little bit more research and realized, you know what? Ultimately, it would be fun to cook. But I know what I'm doing around a coffee machine thanks to Starbucks 15 years ago. And why not take some of those skills and turn it into something where I can connect to the community, and we do a coffee trailer and we have that big window. So it really was this window size that like got us into this idea of let's do a coffee trailer instead of a food truck. And one thing led to another. We started looking for ideas. Campers were really cool. We're in the forest. Camping and hiking is so big here.
It's huge.
And I thought, why not go with that theme? And it just kind of turned into this thing, and we found this old trailer, 1972 Field and Stream, where was it? Yeah, Winslow, Arizona.
Winslow.
Yeah.
Winslow, Arizona.
It was amazing. In a junkyard. And I dragged it out of there, and that's kind of where the journey officially began.
Yeah, so we go back, and all this interest in coffee has started at Starbucks, and the traveling and just planting those seeds of coffee and really coffee and community. It's such a unique, coffee shops are everywhere where people commune and gather and talk and cry and laugh, and there's really not much like coffee in terms of what it provides for a community.
And the culture, the U.S. culture, and around the world, as we discovered, the culture around coffee is such a huge thing, where you just said it's a gathering point. And you can go through the drive-through and jam your cup in your car, in your cup holder in your car, and that's what a lot of us do, which is great. Like it's kind of your commute thing. But if you get a chance, if somebody says, hey, let's meet up at Starbucks, hey, let's meet up over at Cuppers and just kind of have a cup of coffee and chat, that's what you do.
Oh, it's the best.
It's what you do. And you don't usually pass that up.
No.
You're going for it.
It's a huge opportunity.
Exactly.
Give people just a little sense of, you said you pulled this puppy out of a junkyard. Give people just a little more information on what you actually did to get it to look like the way you see it.
I honestly thought that she was in better shape than she was. I don't know if my beer goggles were on or what, but I pulled her out. I dragged her home. Even Lana, my wife, was like, oh, she looks great. Like, this is going to be awesome. So I actually ended up pulling her all the way down south of Phoenix, where my in-laws live. They're out in the desert. And she had a lot of work. The whole inside had to be gutted. I knew that because I didn't want, the bathroom and the bunk beds and all. We didn't need that. So I just needed space to be able to just throw it outside and just see what I had left. And as I was doing that, I put a hammer through a couple corners and realized, oh, this is going to be more than just just a little more. So I ended up taking her almost all the way down to the trailer. There was a couple walls I saved in the glass, and it was really cool in that sense, but there were a lot of nights where I just watched the sunset, and I'm sitting on my chair just kind of letting it sit, just be like, all right, what's the next move? How do I do this? How do I build a rounded corner of a thing so YouTube became my friend, and forums, like some of these forums that guys are on and stuff, and I was just so grateful for that. But she turned into something amazing, and it was a true evolution. There was just different things would come to me, and I'd kind of think, oh yeah, maybe we could work that in and do this, and it was just really great. Good moments.
Has it turned out to work as well as you had thought from the beginning?
I would say even better.
Okay. How come?
I would say mostly because I've learned some things kind of as I've gone along, totally nitty gritty, but the water system, I had no idea what I was doing with plumbing and all that kind of stuff, and I had a couple buddies help me out, and all of a sudden now it makes sense in my head, and everything fit perfectly. I was thinking I'd have to get maybe a 10-gallon tank, which when you think about it, that's 10 milk jugs, which isn't super big. And then the health department said I needed a 40-gallon tank.
Oh, baby.
And you're like, oh, that's quadrupled.
Yeah.
Like, that's big right there. That takes up a lot of space. This is 12 feet of camper. Like, there's not much room. And I still got to jam a machine or two in there and stuff. But it all just fit.
Okay.
Like, the tanks fit. And then it was like, oh, I need a water heater now. Oh, man, how do you do a water? All I knew of water heaters were big, giant things in your house. And then I found, you can get little RV. Yeah, just like tiny little ones. And just stuff like that just kept on clicking like a puzzle. It was amazing.
Things like that, are you required to have?
Yeah.
You have to meet a certain code?
Yeah, there's quite a list of things that I need to have. And there were some surprises in there. Some things I thought I might be able to not have to do, and then I did. Okay. But the health department was great. Nice. And it's one of those things where they're just taking the laws that have been made and have to tell you got to follow this. And as long as you follow along and work with them. Yeah. I mean, it ended up actually coming down to that whole window thing I was telling you about. They actually, the guy that I'm working with, didn't know if that would work. He thought I'd have to go back to my little 18-inch window, and I'd already built out a lot of Jolene, and I was like, it was a rough weekend. That was a soul searching, like, am I really gonna do this? Is this gonna work out? Yeah. And all it took was working with him and with his supervisor, and they ended up actually calling down to Maricopa County and saying, because there was somebody there that had a similar idea. And they said, how did you license this and everything? And Maricopa County worked with them, and I got a call back saying, all right, you're good to go. You can have your big old window. Yeah, it was one of those, like, okay. Yeah. So it was just one of the, like, you just got to sometimes have the patience, allow people to do their job, and work with them.
And a smile, yes.
Right, and give them a smile. Be kind. Like, the harsher you are to people, you might not like what they're telling you, but try to work it out. Yeah. Like, that's just kind of that's the best way you're going to get to what you need.
Absolutely.
So. Yeah.
So what do you offer in your trailer?
Well, we're a full service coffee shop essentially. We've got a beautiful espresso machine by Rancilio. And she's kind of a compact one, which takes a little less of energy from my generator and stuff. But she's got the power to bump out. I mean, I've done 30, 35 lattes in an hour, so she's really good. So we can do any kind of latte. We make all our own syrups.
Oh, really?
Yeah, those are all house-made,
awesome.
which is really cool. We wanted to do something a little more...
Little touches.
Little touches. Keep it a little more natural and not in the trendy sense, but, like, we only use the ingredients that you need to actually taste what lavender honey is like. We use lavender and honey.
What
and
a shock, right?
Yeah, there's no weird oils and no weird chemicals and stuff. So we decided to do that. We've also got batch brew, where I brew up either our trailer blend, or today you and I are drinking the Honduras, which is a single farm origin, which is kind of cool. We do ice drinks. I've got iced teas and cold brews and all that kind of stuff. Pretty much the only thing that I haven't been able to figure out, and it's kind of a power issue with my generator, because I can't just plug into a wall. I mean, I can, but I don't have a wall to plug into, right? And the believe it or not, those blenders that you mix things up with, like your frappuccinos and stuff, they just suck so much power. And my whole trailer would
Before
just
you
shut
said
down.
it, I thought blender.
Yeah, there's just no way. So that's about the only thing that we don't have on the trailer, but we're still even then trying to figure out how
I was going to say, have people been requesting it?
I would say it's only been a couple times. Okay. It hasn't been as much as I thought might happen. So I think people kind of know now. Yeah. And it's more of a, you just get it on the rocks instead of frozen kind of thing. So it works out.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Guys, Jolene is so cool. It's like a throwback, I feel like. But oftentimes the throwback that's just simply been updated is just the best.
Right.
It's like what it was in 1970, whatever you said. It's it's classic,
and I get
clean.
a lot of people that come up and they want to, they'll just talk trailers.
Right.
Especially some older dudes. They're like, hey, I had one of these when I was a 20-year-old touring around the country, and they just want to talk trailers. And it's just fun. Like, it's trailers and generators. That 55 plus generation, they want to talk trailers and they want to talk generators. They just love it. And I'm like, okay, I got to get my brain working on that.
That's
not just coffee. Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Let's talk a little bit about coffee. So right here is a Honduras blend that you just had.
Yeah.
And this really speaks to what makes coffee special and what really takes it back to the farmer who actually grows it. So just educate people a little bit on coffee.
Mm-hmm.
Most people are most familiar with Folgers.
Totally.
Or with Starbucks.
And
that's where it ends.
Yep.
I've recently ordered some green beans and tried roasting myself.
Nice.
And
Good
I've
for you,
decided that I
man.
really need an actual roaster of some sort, a turnstile.
Yep.
I've been doing it on a cast iron skillet, and it just
nice.
doesn't, it just, you can't air it enough out. So anyways, talk to people a little bit, give people some education on coffee, because there's a lot to it.
Yeah, so coffee is a tree. It's basically a big shrub, and it grows only in the tropics. You can literally only grow it between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. Like, that's it. So no, your coffee in Prescott is not going to be like uber local necessarily, but because of that, there are some amazing countries that are just exporting some beautiful coffees. It grows on these trees, and it literally looks like a cherry as it grows, and they're in bunches. You might have seen pictures, but it's like a bunch of cherries, I don't know, 12 or 15 of them on one kind of bunch. And when they are harvested, when they're ripe, the grower goes through, and usually it's a hand-picking process. These are really small farms.
Okay.
I mean, you're talking hillsides in Costa Rica and like middle of nowhere Kenya and places like that where it's a small farmer, and they are often in co-ops, and they get together and work together and things like that. So they'll pull these off the tree, and then it becomes that's when the processing starts. And so once it's been harvested, you have to pull that cherry, the fruit part, you actually have to pull that off, and what you're eating is essentially the seed, or literally the bean of the coffee.
Okay.
And so it's green, it's kind of whitish green, and once that's pulled out of the cherry, then it starts the drying process and things like that. Some people, like the Honduras one that we have, it's a washed process, which means that it has literally sat in the sun and the cherry is dried off of it. And then they kind of shake it around and get rid of the cherry part, and then they wash off the remaining of whatever kind of little bits might be on that. And then that turns into, once it's been fully dried, that's your like green coffee. So there's a bit of a processing that goes into it.
What's the
sure.
timing on something like that?
You know,
2
I don't
weeks,
even
2
really
months?
know. No,
Okay.
It wouldn't be in the months. It'd be in the weeks. I need to educate myself a little more on that timing, but it's not months necessarily. And then it goes, usually then at that point goes to some sort of a transport. That's where it starts to get into the middleman kind of thing. And then it makes its way to a port and bagged up with a bunch of other stuff.
Yeah.
The cool part so I get all my coffee through a local roaster, Roasted Ott, and she's the one more, she's obviously on the front lines of that end of it. So she does the ordering. There's a few companies out there that kind of do these specialty orderings. Starbucks and some of those bigger companies, they're going on such a massive scale that they're just kind of sourcing from almost their own farms anymore.
Absolutely.
So there's not even, you can't even cut, it's just a whole different level.
Yes.
Whereas she's going through companies that work with these farmers and with these co-ops around the world, and she can use them to source some really fantastic green coffee. Yep. And by the time it gets to her, it's gone through a couple ports, makes its way over to good old Prescott, Arizona, and she's just got, bins full of these green coffee beans. And then she can pull, either she'll do a single origin like our Honduras, like you pointed out, and that's from a single family down in Honduras, which is really cool. It's called direct trade. It doesn't even go through a middleman, which is really neat. And then we also have a trailer blend, which is what I usually use on the trailer, and it's got a little bit of Sumatra, a little bit of so from Indonesia, a little bit of Central American. So that's where you get those blends. And she can take those green coffees and just like, okay, maybe a little of this, maybe a little of that. Yeah. It's more scientific than that.
Of course, a lot more.
But she throws it into the roaster, and she can dial that in just perfectly there. So
that's it's a fascinating subculture.
Yes,
that's
totally
why I've
is.
enjoyed getting into it. And then once you start drinking different coffee, you get different flavors. And what I've also, a little bit of what I've learned is, let's say this person in Honduras, based on where they're at, their bean is going to taste slightly different than the guy who's even just a couple hills over, because that's a different area. And just these subtle nuances that you get.
You have to think of it almost as wine, like where
it's a very good.
There's so much that goes on in the soil and in the atmosphere.
All of those things.
So many of those things. Where
that's why it's fascinating.
Yeah, it truly is.
Yeah.
It's a pretty amazing thing. You've got everything from Kenya, where if you drink a Kenya coffee, which I think is one of your favorites, if I remember right.
Yep.
You've got Kenya, which is like citrusy. And then you can go to Ethiopia, which, let's be honest, like they're on the same continent. I think they might even share a border. I could be wrong. But Ethiopian coffees have blueberry notes. Like blueberries barely even grow in Ethiopia. And yet if you open up a bag of Ethiopian beans, you can literally smell blueberries. And there's no flavoring in there. It's not like they threw a bunch of dried blueberries in. It's just that's what the earth does over there. It's so cool.
You guys, if you're not into coffee, you should really if you drink coffee, doesn't mean you're into coffee. But once you start dabbling a little, you start tasting the nuances, and I think that's where the fun for Emily and I especially comes in is, we like getting a bag of this and a bag of that, and just the differences.
Yeah, totally.
It's fun.
It's so fun.
Yeah. I believe you have shared, you've touched on it, but not specifically. Tell us why you do what you do and why you enjoy it so much.
Well, the number one reason that we wanted to open something up and do kind of our own business, however that looked, was literally to be a part of and help in creating community. And that's number one. It just is. And I like coffee.
Of course.
And it's good, and I like to educate myself on it, and I like to serve it to people and things like that. But bottom line was the community. And that's what was so important about having a big old window. I wanted it to be like Cheers. I wanted it to be like a bar, like a whatever, a place where people can come up and just chat.
People can't see it, but around Jolene is a chair, and I asked you earlier, why is there a chair here? And you said, well, people just like to come by, and I want a place for them to sit so they can talk to me while I'm in Jolene.
Yep.
There you go.
That's what it is. And I grew up with, in Canada, especially our part of Canada, there was literally like a coffee time, and twice a day. It's kind of gone away here especially in the western states now, but there was a time where at 10 a.m. and then at 2:30 or 3 p.m. it was coffee time, and all the restaurants and coffee shops in my little town just exploded. There wasn't a table open, and it was 15 to 20 minutes of all these people just getting together and having coffee. And it was such an integral part of keeping the community knitted together. And I wanted to create coffee time, so I have this back kind of bar on the trailer so that you can sit there if you want. If you have 15 minutes, just hang out. I might be fairly busy, but we can have a little conversation here and there and snippets and stuff. But ultimately that was my goal, was to continue what was already happening. I'm not trying to say that we came in and all of a sudden started up this great community. There was a great community in place, and we just wanted to
become integrated into it and add to it.
And bring people in that maybe weren't feeling connected yet. And we've had a lot of people that have just moved. As we know, Prescott's growing. A lot of people are moving here. And we've had so many people come up and say, we just moved here. And those are people that we can say, welcome. Here's a cup of coffee, like swing by again and let's chat, and like here's where you can go eat tonight, here's a good playground to take your kids.
And it's even people who just visit on the weekend. The square's right here, you get a ton of people, Saturdays and Sundays, that they're just here out of town.
And we're all in community, even if you're a tourist.
Exactly.
You're dropping in for a couple hours, you're still going to connect with a photography shop down the street where they're showing off some of their art, and you're going to connect with the restaurant servers, and like, you're just in community no matter what. No matter what.
Well, I love what you're doing here. And
Thank you.
From what little I've seen, other people would agree with me.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for sharing all that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
I love that, the community aspect as well, which is one reason this show has been so fun for me. It hasn't been so much work as just a pleasure to get to know people, just have a conversation and try to connect people as well. I love it.
Yeah, totally.
The whole community
and
aspect.
it's really cool. Just you saying that, I think your podcast, the last one was with Black Butterfly Chocolates, right? Am I right on that? So we collaborated with them on one of their chocolates. And then we've collaborated with a local ice cream place that just started up.
I want them on the podcast.
I know, right? You got to get her. She's great. But that's the other thing, too, is that it's been and that was totally just happened. We didn't go out searching for that. We had people approach us and say, hey, can we grab some beans and make some cool chocolate with it? And it's like, like what another way to connect and to show like we're all just kind of doing our thing. We're going to work together to create this community.
Yeah, it's not this competition like what so many business. And that's actually what I really like about Prescott. The greater Prescott area in general. Of course, there's businesses that really view it as competition.
Yes, sure.
But there's a majority of the business culture here is about how can I help you, Joe?
Exactly.
What do you need?
Exactly. In fact, if I can't convince somebody that they don't need that blended drink that they really want, because I don't have a blender, if I can't bring them around to, hey, but what if you tried this? I'll literally be like, all right, it sounds like you really got your heart set on that Frappuccino. Right across the street, there's Cuppers. Yeah. Just down the way over there is Wild Iris. And we can like totally connect with that and say like, yeah, you need a place to sit down and do your homework. You're not going to be able to do that here. Like I've got a pretty limited space and it's pretty hot in the summer and cold. Like it's not going to happen. So go hang out there. And then maybe when you're swinging by the square, swing by me and we'll just chat and get you a cup of coffee. Like you got to work together.
One sign of a business owner or frankly of a person who, I don't know necessarily the words to describe, but maybe it's just someone who's humble and knows themselves well, is their ability to simply say, you know what, that's not something I can offer, so just head over there because they do it really well. And I think it's really hard for especially business owners to not try to get all the business that they can instead of saying, you know what, that company just does it a little better than me, or I don't do it, but I know those people and they'll take great care of you.
Exactly.
There's something really, I love that.
Totally. And I think it's somebody said the other day, a rising tide lifts all boats. And I think that's truly how you have to look at it. Like our little part of the harbor, excuse me, is coffee shops. And that's who we are. That's our boats, right? And if we can like work with each other instead of bumping into each other too much, like that rising tide's going to lift us all up. We're all going to be good because of it. So
yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, I know partially what brought you here, but talk a little bit more about the greater Prescott area and what it is that drew you here and gets you up in the morning.
Yeah. I would say a big part of it was the outdoors. We really wanted our boys to be able to access the outdoors quickly. And we could do it. We were stuck in the middle of a big city.
Just slightly closer.
We could do it. We could do it in a larger city, but it just took a little more effort. And even with playgrounds and for a while we lived right on South Mountain down in Phoenix, which is like a huge outdoor playground. It's amazing. But even with that, it was like, man, it just wasn't quite as accessible. And as we looked at Flagstaff, which obviously had that potential there and things like that, we were like, but we wanted something just that felt a little smaller. And there's something to the moniker of everybody's hometown. Like it just feels a little bit more comfortable in that sense here. And we knew that if we could get our boys up here, we could be outside in no time. Sure enough, we move into this apartment that's like 2 seconds away from Acker Park. We didn't even know, first of all, that Prescott existed. And then we get here and Acker Park is like however many acres of just open space and trails. And we were just walking it every morning. Like it was incredible. It was right out our back door. We could not have had that in many places. And Prescott has created this opportunity to connect with the outdoors. And as far as you said, with the greater area, we can connect with people from all over the place. So you want to come here and you want it to feel like you're kind of suburban California, then head out to PV. Absolutely. And you're going to feel so comfortable out there. And we're going to connect with you out there too, somehow, some way, right? Like, and then you like a little more space, a little more acreage. You go out to Chino Valley. Like this is all within 20 minutes of us. And you can have all of that, still connecting with the outdoors and other people. And that's just incredible to me. And like you said, we're growing, but I think that it's in such a positive way.
Yeah.
I really do. And I know that some people have some trouble with the idea of growth, but let's face it, we live in one of the most beautiful places. People are going to come here. I mean, if you want to live somewhere, go where I grew up in my little tiny town where it's minus 30 in the middle of winter.
Right.
People aren't moving there in droves because it's just way too cold and it's just like the reason people are moving here is because it's beautiful and it's just a great spot. So let's embrace it and just hang out together.
Yeah, I find it hilarious when people say they don't like all the growth, and then I ask them why they moved here, and it's the same reason that the droves of us are moving here. So I also think we have a good plan for growth.
For sure.
Which I'm excited for that very reason, that yes, we're going to grow, and it's going to be in as beneficial way as it can be.
Exactly.
I mean, as sustainable as it can be. So
that's exactly it.
Okay.
Exactly.
Guys, that's why my family and I moved here too. Largely the outdoors. I mean, yes, because we were in the Phoenix area, and of course there's a lot of outdoor activities.
Yep.
But it's not quite as accessible or diverse.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and we just have access to so much of it. If you want a little bit of a bigger mountain, like we were saying before we started the podcast, you just drive up to Flagstaff. It's like a couple hours. Or you want a little bit more of this, like southern Utah is not that far, so you're in a really beautiful desert. Like, there's just so much accessibility. It's incredible.
Yeah, within 4 to 6 to 10 hours, which seems like a long time, but it's nothing in the big scheme of things. You can get to so many places. It
anywhere.
Is wild.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing why you like it here. We're going to wrap up the podcast with a rapid fire 7 questions.
Go.
Give me whatever comes to mind first.
All right.
What's your favorite thing about Greater Prescott?
The outdoors.
What's your favorite restaurant in Greater Prescott?
Oh, man.
Then go 3. Go fast.
I'll go 3. I like Bill's Grill. We're vegetarian, so Bill's Grill is good for veggie burgers. Stacked food truck that I share a lot with is great, and I really like Chai's Thai out by the mall.
What is your favorite all-time cookie that your wife makes?
Ooh, I mean, it has to be the salted chocolate chip pecan. It's just amazing.
Do you have that?
I've got it. Right. Almost every day.
What are 3 words that you use to describe living in Prescott?
Beautiful, community, safe.
If you weren't a coffee trailer owner, then what would you be doing?
I'd be a food truck trailer owner.
With a big window.
With a really big window.
Last question. What is your favorite summer activity in Greater Prescott?
I'd say hiking, finding swimming holes, exploring, that sort of a thing.
A lot of exploring to be done.
A lot of exploring. It's really amazing.
Yeah. You guys, we're going to end it here. Joe, tell everyone how they can connect with you and figure out where you're going to be.
Okay, so I'm usually down on this lot where we're shooting from today, which is on Goodwin and Montezuma. That's my normal spot Thursday through Sunday. 8 to about 3.
Okay.
You can follow along on our Instagram. It's Campgrounds Tea and Coffee. Facebook, same name, Campgrounds Tea and Coffee. If you're following along with those, I'll update if I'm anywhere else. And you can also follow along with the build process. I'm kind of flashing back to Jolene's early days, so you can follow that. Every Monday I do a post on that. So there's a lot to kind of learn and discover on our social media too. So
great. You guys, I do the Greater Prescott podcast to introduce you to people like Joe and stories like Joe, because it is exactly who you are and what you do that makes our community what it is. It's unique, diverse, amazing. So I really appreciate your time. I genuinely do. Business owners are busy. You got kids. I got kids. I understand. So I genuinely appreciate your time today.
Yeah. Well,
so you guys, please come downtown, get a coffee from Joe. There's a chair around the corner. Sit around, talk with them. Come grab some coffee too. Come try the Honduras blend. I'm excited to be drinking it right now, actually.
It's good stuff.
So you guys, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day.